Be a futurologist. I am no longer a futurologist. I should have seen that coming, I know, but my job title has got significantly more boring recently, mainly because I got really fed up of being asked the same question every time I introduced myself as a futurologist. I can feel the question coming through, which is, do you have a crystal ball? Well, the answer to that is yes, I do. It doesn't work, sadly. If I had to read tea leaves all day or look at crystal balls, that would be a really boring job. My job title is boring, but my job most definitely isn't. So I work for a part of BT that most people don't know about, and that's because we're incredibly, we're really bad at telling anybody. So I'm part of our innovation team. So I'm based at Adastral Park, also known as Martlesham, which is our main research and innovation headquarters. It's in the middle of, well, I got into trouble by saying it's in the middle of a cow field just outside Ipswich. It's actually an old Royal Air Force base, and it's got an incredible heritage. It was where the Royal Air Force used to build and crash new aircraft, basically. So I like to think that we do the same thing with technologies now. So there's about 4,500 of us on site. We're the third biggest investor in the UK in innovation. You didn't know that, did you? Because we're not very good at telling people about it. And like most very large corporates, we don't do innovation on our own. So Martlesham is just part of the picture. We work with all sorts of people around the world on all sorts of projects. We have this lovely, well, rather pretentiously named innovation ecosystem, which includes people like Massachusetts Institute of Technology over in Boston, slightly closer to me, Cambridge University. We have tech scouts around the world in places like Silicon Valley, Israel, and indeed in the UK, looking at all sorts of innovations that are coming up. Now, I am not a technologist. I am the non-technologist in the innovation team. And I keep saying that having a psychologist in an innovation team actually makes a lot of sense because technology in itself does not cause innovation. What causes innovation and disruption is us. So actually trying to understand behaviors is one of the fundamental things that we try and do in the innovation space. So most of my role is around, well, what behaviors are we seeing, particularly with customers and also with employees, so the human bits of the relationship, and where might technology fit in? Where is it appropriate to put technology? So what I'm going to do today is talk you through some research that typically, we've done for large global corporates, but it's basically looking at customers, us, and our habits in the way that we've changed in the way that we typically engage with organizations, whether those organizations are your telecoms company, your utilities company, your bank, or indeed, I have the pleasure of going down to Blackpool tomorrow to do a session with the Universal Credit guys in the DWP. So indeed, what they are thinking about in terms of contact as well. So to be honest, at the back, you're going to need binoculars for these slides. I do apologise, but we will get copies. If anyone's interested, we'll make sure that if you like stats, you can get a copy of the slides. It's just our designers seem to like really small fonts, so I apologise in advance for the guys at the back. But what I'm going to talk about today is some research, because it's not about crystal balls. It's all about research. This is some research that we've been doing for the past, well, actually, probably longer than 10 years, but in this form, about 10 years. It's global, so we go around the world and we ask lots and lots of customers across all sorts of ages and demographics how they want to contact organisations. And we've done this every other year, pretty much from 2010. We started off very modestly in 2010 with just the UK and the US, and then the last iteration we published was in November in 2017. We got to 10 countries around the world. Now, for those of you mathematically inclined, you will notice that probably we're on the cusp of doing the next iteration. So hopefully, probably November this year, we'll have a new set of data that we can compare. So what I'm going to talk about are some of the trends that are dropping out, how people are changing in the way that they're communicating, and what the implications are for people like you guys who are talking to customers on a daily basis. Now, the first trend is really obvious, to be perfectly honest. We like things to be easy as customers because we are quite lazy. We don't really want to work hard getting answers to questions that we didn't really want to ask in the first place. So I call this the E word, whether you call it easy, whether you call it effort. And a lot of the stats are pointing towards, well, if you want to put technology in especially, the one thing you need to think about is, does it make it easier for your customers. If it doesn't make it easier for your customers, they're probably not going to use it. But a lot of the trends that we find is things like convenience is driving a lot of behaviors. Easy is driving a lot of behaviors. Certainly a lot of the stuff that we've been doing internally in BT has been asking this question: how do we make it easier? The question I ask whenever I see an innovation to the technologists is, does it make it easier for me? So we need to bear this in mind. If we're going to put new innovation in, or we're going to introduce something, how do we convince people that it's going to make things easier for them? They don't have to get in a car and drive 10 miles down the road in order to get face-to-face advice. They can do it from the convenience of their sofa. So easy is a dominant umbrella trend that we've been looking at. The next trend is kind of obvious, because we can see it. Smartphones are becoming our window on the world. So we live and die with this little device in front of our eyes. Now, we have been discussing whether we're in a post-PC era, where we're throwing away the keyboard and the mouse, and we're into the land of swipes and voice interfaces. So, of course, there's a lot of hype at the moment around things like Alexa, and Siri and Cortana. Now, I don't know about you, but I've yet to have a particularly profound conversation with any of those things. And indeed, one of the questions is, okay, if we're going to deliver services over something like Alexa, does it make it easier for me? So I've been working with an airline recently, one of our large global corporate customers. They wanted to use Alexa to check in and get a boarding pass. But of course, you can do it on the app as well. So on the smartphone, we did a little bit of a usability test for them. So on the smartphone, I checked in and I got my boarding pass, which everyone does, frankly, now. It took me about 2 minutes. On Alexa, it took me nearly 6 minutes. Now, the reason it took so long was at some point it read out everything I couldn't take on a plane. I was literally slitting my wrists halfway through. Now, the question there is, am I willing to sacrifice 6 minutes of my life to check in and get a boarding pass when I can do it in 2 minutes on an app? That's a big question. We might do it once or twice on Alexa because it's fun, but I suspect actually the easy trend is going to force us towards doing things on apps. Now, apps are fantastic, but when we interview customers about their smartphone, the big problem, and I'm sure we've all got this problem, is apps take up too much memory. So I've got to the point on my iPhone at the moment that if I'm going to download an app, I have to delete photographs or videos, and I don't want to do that, so I don't download the app. And why should I? Because does the app actually add any value to me? Now, there's lots of apps out there. So we did ask our tech scouts, well, all right, if apps are useful, which some of them are, how do we actually get an app without the app? Because I don't want to have to download and clog up my phone. So the Silicon Valley scouts came up with an answer. They found a company called Wrap, which is a Silicon Valley startup. Wrap is an app without the app. Now, what Wrap does is effectively, if you're taking a call, we're using this in EE at the moment in the shops as well. You're maybe having a conversation about a mobile phone. The advisor can basically say, okay, this is the phone model, so we can drag and drop bits and pieces of information. And then when the customer goes out the store, what we do is we send them a link. And they can click on that link, and it looks exactly like an app, but nothing gets downloaded. And it's also personalized to them, so that when they get home, they can browse, they can see what they've bought, they can see what tariff they're on. So again, what we're trying to do is to duplicate behaviors that we're seeing. So people like apps, but they don't like downloading apps. How can we actually create something that customers like that doesn't take up memory? So there's micro apps. Now, I have to say, you at the back have got no hope on this slide, but don't worry about it. This graph excites me because I'm quite sad. So what this is comparative data from the UK for the past 4 iterations of the research around how customers are changing in the way that they want to interact with organizations using different channels. We often talk about this concept of omni-channel. I hate that word. I have yet to think of a better word, to be honest, but there is this concept of omni-channel. Now, to be fair, what's happening here, we can see from the graphs, is overall, people aren't contacting organizations as much as they used to. So overall, contact is going down. There are only 2 that buck the trend. One is apps. We've already talked about the reasons for that. The other one is chat, which I will cover later. So that's the first thing. Self-service is pushing out a lot of contact. Now, the second thing we notice is that there are lots of new and sexy channels like social media that have been very hyped. They're on the decline. The ones that aren't growing but are still standing up are the very traditional channels. So the phone still comes out as top in terms of the channel of choice for a lot of customers when they have a question, when they want advice. Email also comes out very strongly. Not necessarily a great channel for corporates because it can be quite expensive. I describe it as a slow tennis match. In other words, I send an email in, I get one back. I don't understand it, I send another one in. But actually it's very convenient. It's on my time, it's on my terms. So customers tend to like email. It's quite difficult to turn email off. We did try it in BT for 3 months. We turned it back on after 3 months because we knew our customers were demanding they wanted to email us. We did shift a lot of people off onto chat though. Face-to-face is still standing up, but it's also in decline, and there's always a chicken and egg situation here. Now, I work with a lot of banks. Now, obviously, they're closing a lot of bank branches. So is the closure of bank branches forcing down people's preference for face-to-face? That's a very big question. I don't know the answer to it either. But what we see is a really interesting picture. We shouldn't get too carried away by some of the sexy channels. Some of the conventional channels are very much finding their niche. The phone especially, although we're seeing less volume coming in a lot of contact centres, we're also seeing call handle times go up by as much as 40%. And that's indicative of the fact that people, when they lift the phone up, usually have something complex and emotive to discuss. That's very difficult to do on some of these other digital channels. So the phone is getting a very big niche in that area. What we typically find is, so I'm a psychologist, I'm less interested in the channels. I'm more interested in why people are using these channels, because we all use all of them, frankly. But what's the underlying behavioural trend here? So we interviewed a lot of customers as well as asking, usual sort of stats type questions. And what we found was typically customers don't think about channels at all. They have a goal. They want to feed their family. They want to move house. They have a desire, a goal. Underlying that goal is an emotional state, an intention state that's typically either positive, negative, or neutral. And it is that intention state that drives behaviour over and above things like age, because a lot of people are saying, hey, millennials, they don't ring anymore. Well, they do if they're in crisis, if they're negatively motivated. So typically what we've done is we've started to segment on intention state, positive, negative, neutral, because actually that dictates channel choice. So visionaries, positively intention state customers, positively motivated customers, typically want to do what they're doing. They are moving house. They want to make sure things are right. They're planning the perfect party. They're getting married. So they want to do it. So they are willing to invest time, energy, and effort in researching all of this stuff. But they can also be paranoid. Am I doing the right thing? Is it going to arrive in time? That might force them into a contact channel. Now, you could put some digital stuff in front of them. They may be happy with that. They might want to talk to somebody as well. They're not problematic, though, visionary customers, as long as you don't confuse them. The problem is they can very easily turn into a negatively motivated customer, or, to be perfectly honest, a lot of the people that you have are starting in a negative state. In other words, they're customers in crisis. Now, crisis is really interesting because it does weird stuff to our brains. So if we're angry, frustrated, anxious, weird hormones start to rush into my brain. And there are lots of things that happen at that point. The primary one for design is our short-term memory capacity halves. Now, normally my short-term memory capacity is between 7 and 9 bits. So we've all been through to a contact center and got that DTMF, press 1, press 2 experience. Now, normally when I'm calm, I can remember between 7 and 9 bits. So press 1 for this, that's 2. Press 2 for this, press 3 for this. Okay, I might be able to fit a 4th in, but I'm pretty much up to capacity. That's when I'm calm. Now I'm angry. My short-term memory capacity has halved. Press 1 for this, press 2 for. I can't remember what 1 was for. So instantly we start to see that if we're going to put automation in front of a customer in crisis, we have to make it very very simple. They don't read FAQs. They don't understand complex stuff. We have to make it very, very simple for them. And to be perfectly honest, the behavioral trend we see with customers in crisis is to go to a human channel. So mostly they pick the phone up. So again, the bulk of phone contact comes from a customer in crisis because they want to talk to somebody, also face-to-face as well, because they want to de-risk the decision. So they're difficult to deal with, and obviously, you guys deal with them on a daily basis. Now, we have positive and negative. There is a neutral state. We call it utilitarian. This is very routine stuff, paying bills, buying carrots. I do not need a profound experience here. I just want it quick, and I want it easy, that E word again. If we can put appropriate automation in, people in a utilitarian mode actually embrace this. So we're starting to think about things in a very different way around how do we deploy the right channel for this customer? How do we try and gather data about this customer up front to try and steer them to the best channel that is likely to get them to their goal? So there are lots of channels emerging. One interesting one we're working with is video at the moment. Now, there are a couple of trends driving video. One trend is the YouTube trend. So the fact is that I frequently just go onto YouTube when I have a problem now to try and find a video to solve that problem because I have lost the ability to read. So I don't want FAQs, I want a video. So that's one thing. How can we start to embrace a YouTube type environment for advice? The second thing is, of course, a lot of us are Skyping and FaceTiming now. So we're becoming, again, being driven by the smartphone, the fact we have a camera, we're starting to get a lot more interactivity in our videos. And indeed, we're seeing big growth, certainly in the banks, on mortgage advice, for example. I have learnt, working with some of the banks, that mortgage advisors do not exist in branches. They don't grow on trees, indeed. So it's actually quite difficult sometimes to get a physical mortgage advisor into a branch. So working with the likes of Nationwide, for example, if you walk into Nationwide and say, I want mortgage advice, they'll usually go, well, the mortgage advisor's in next Tuesday, but we can give you a video advice now. And actually 97% of their customers are saying, can I have the video advice? Because they want a mortgage. They don't want to have to wait. Similarly, healthcare, we've got apps like Babylon, for example. Babylon is a wonderful app. I use it all the time. So there's a chat bot. I can ask it lots of questions about the disease I think I might have got. It triages me. And then in an emergency, it can then take me through to a GP on the end of a video link. It's not replacing a GP visit, to be honest. I will still probably go and see my GP if it's very, very urgent. But it's deflecting some of that demand into GP surgeries. So let's have a look at some of the innovation coming out of this. So the first one is the YouTube stuff. So YouTube is great, but it's all very impersonal. It's not about me. So again, scouting around, we found a company in Israel called iDemu that does something called personalized video. And it's like a mail merge for video. So it takes my information and it squirts it into a video template. So it's all about me. So what we've done in BT especially, and we've done it also with mortgage advice with Barclays, is to say, well, if we can figure out pain points for the customer, things that they're ringing us, that they're confused about, can we start to use their information and send a video proactively to them to explain what they're seeing or what to expect? With us in BT, one of the biggest source of calls is bill shock. So you've just joined BT. You get your first bill and you go, what the hell is this? And then you ring us. So what we've done is created personalized videos that we send out to our new customers that explain the bill. So I'll just show you a little bit.
Hello, Mark. We're from BT. It's really good to have you with us, and we're going to talk you through your first bill. Your bill is made up of 4 sections. One-off charges, rental and other charges, changes to the this bill, and what you used.
Let's start at the top. One-off charges include things like delivery, an engineer connecting your line, activation fees, and any UPH you use to get set up. And this is what that section goes to.
So you get the picture. Basically, what we're trying to do is to personalize it to the customer so that it's their information. They engage with it as well. We worked on an insurance example where one guy clicked this video. It was all about him. He got so obsessed, he clicked it 50 times. I think he's got a problem, to be perfectly honest, but that's one example of how to slightly differently engage with something that's about me, but in a content form that customers like. The second one is that interactive video stuff. So we've just rolled this out. It's called Cycle in our BT Consumer division. So now what we can do is, rather than send an engineer out to do broadband diagnostics, we can actually take control of your smartphone. Now, with the customer's permission, it has to be said. So what we do is we send a link to the customer. We explain to them that what it will do is basically allow us to see through the camera and indeed even activate the light on the smartphone to try and help us to do remote diagnostics. So for broadband, for example, we can actually say, well, can you show us the back of the computer? We can also do pattern recognition, artificial intelligence, and overlay, because they're standard wires. We can start to overlay what those wires are and which bits you need to plug in. So it's, again, very visual, but for us, it allows our advisors to actually do stuff without sending an engineer out. So you don't have to wait for an engineer, we don't have the expense of an engineer going out, and we can also diagnose the faults. One brilliant example the other day was a lady had rung up and said her BT Sport box was not working. So she said, could she get an engineer out? So we used Cycle to basically have a look, see what was plugged in, and then the advisor said, what remote control are you using? Yeah, that's not the right remote control. Find the remote control. Oh, it's working now. So she might have had to wait 2 weeks for an engineer to come out and do that. We managed to do that within minutes. So win-win situation. So we can start to use video in quite interesting ways. But video is very small in comparison with chat, and I know you're doing a lot with chat. Chat is a phenomenal growth channel. We're seeing 20% growth in just 2 years in terms of customers' preferences for using chat. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's a digital-first channel, so I can do it from my smartphone. I can do it from my desktop. It's one that customers like. It's very convenient and easy for them. Actually, it's a lot cheaper than something like email, so the business case tends to stack up about it. And to be perfectly honest, we've done a lot of interviews with advisors using chat as well, and they like it too, because you don't have to have an instant response for a customer. You can think about your responses. You don't have to put the customer on hold. All sorts of things means that there's a triple pull on chat. But of course, inevitably, a lot of this chat is kind of, very transactional stuff. Opening hours, just basic things. I can't find this. Can you tell me where it is? You don't want humans to do that. And that's where this conversation about chatbots come in. Now, most of my life at the moment is about chatbots. I'm working on about 8 different projects, mostly with financial services on chatbots. Now, chatbots are, well, interesting, because 2 years ago we asked customers about chatbots and they had no idea what they were or whether they would be useful. Now, you've probably noticed in the press recently there's been quite a lot of discussion about chatbots, and that's raised the hype and expectation with customers. So 73% of customers we asked thought that chatbots were going to significantly improve digital service. I'm not sure that's the case, to be perfectly honest. There are some incredible chatbots out there, but there are some terrible ones as well that have just been deployed completely inappropriately. My favourite bot, I have to say, is Margot the wine bot. Now, Margot works for Lidl, and Margot does one thing very well. Only one thing very well, which is typically where chatbots sit. So Margot does food-wine combinations. So I can ask Margot, what goes with fish and chips? Apparently it's champagne. That just increased the cost of Fishy Friday quite a bit. But, and of course Lidl can sell champagne off the back of that, but it's not just about champagne and fish and chips, but it's a very narrow field. You can't ask Margot everything about everything. I don't know why I call her she, it's a bot, but all that she knows is food-wine combinations. Now, I've done quite a lot of bot work in the past. The thing is, it does work for simple stuff. As I said, they're not great conversationalists, frankly, bots. A lot of this is about data. If you haven't got data, these things do not work by magic. You need to tell them what to say. If you haven't got the data, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's not always appropriate to deploy a bot. On those emotive customer in crisis things, you might want to initially have one, but you probably want to quite quickly route through to a human. To be honest, a lot of the stuff that we're doing within innovation at the moment is to make sure that if we have a conversation with a bot, we can then steer it rapidly into the human, but also give the human a record of the conversation so that they can pick up where the bot finished. Certainly it's more difficult for things like complaints. Any of you who deal with complaints will know they're quite long, so that's one problem. Most of human language is redundant because it was built for us to talk to each other, not to talk to a robot. The second problem is we often deploy things like sarcasm as well, and sarcasm and algorithms do not go together terribly well. So my favorite example actually was from Twitter. Thank you to a particular train operating company for my free sauna this morning. The algorithm thought that was amazing, brilliant, fantastic. We know it's not, but then why would it know that it wasn't amazing? The algorithm has never been on a train. It doesn't know if you stick a train and a sauna together, that is not a pleasant experience. I would need to teach it that. There is apparently a company that is using humans to tag sarcasm so that algorithms can understand it. They have 300 people doing that, apparently, but it's very difficult to do, particularly when you get something really subtle, like it was so good to see your maintenance department hadn't spoilt things by making unnecessary repairs. Again, the algorithm, brilliant! We know that's sarcasm. I'm not sure how I would teach the bot that it was sarcasm. And one of the biggest problems we have in this space is context. They have no idea about context. They have no idea about emotion, although they're starting to get some clues about emotion. There's some very controversial work going on at Silicon Valley at the moment, predictably, looking at things like, well, we can pick up voice stress analysis. Does the customer sound stressed? Are they swearing? That might be indications of they're angry. We can also use the camera in the smartphone to look at micro expressions on your face to again start to figure out, how are you feeling? The trouble with that is it might not be what you're looking at that's generating the feeling. So we can give algorithms some clues, and we can create some very scary looking bots. Now, I'm going to show you an example here. This is a video from Australia. It's a company that has been building avatars and sticking behind that avatar machine learning and emotion recognition. Now, they've been doing this very specifically for government services, and I'd be interested in your reaction after I've shown you this.
I can see you and hear you. I can sense your environment, and I can respond to your emotions. I guess you could say I'm putting a human face on artificial intelligence.
So you'll notice the target there were particularly we're looking at things like neurodiversity, autism, disabled people who traditionally actually do struggle with technologies. Can we give them access to a slightly different way of talking? But again, it's not about replacing humans. There's again a lot of hype in the press. The robots are going to take over. They're going to take all the jobs. No, they're not, because we are good at certain things that robots are really bad at, and you will. Hands up if you found that a bit creepy, by the way. Partially it's the music, I know, but I think there's a creep factor as well. That might change as we get more used to things, but I don't like the word artificial intelligence because we are much better at certain things, even spotting sarcasm, for example. I call it augmented intelligence. But what it does is it takes away, those bots will take away the simple transactional stuff, the stuff that they understand. It leaves us with the complex stuff. So what we've actually done is sort of, we've done some personas, actually, around what we think the humans are going to be doing in terms of advice. So Sally is a multitasker. She's probably closest to what you do now. So effectively, the bot has routed it to Sally. Sally's picking up the conversation because actually that conversation is complex or requires, you know, things like empathy, which frankly, these things do not do very well. We do very well. We've got Paula, who's a problem solver, taking on really complex stuff where the computer has said no. It's fallen through the cracks. So again, we're good at doing that. Algorithms are not. Natalie's a negotiator. A lot of your guys are going to be good at negotiating. So how do we get a win-win situation? Now, partially that's rules-based, but it's also social and emotional, and that's the difficult bit to automate. Tony's a techie. A lot of stuff in Tony's head through years of experience, and I found out to my cost, actually, when I started to build a neural network back in the 90s, to be honest. This is not new stuff. We were looking at building artificial intelligence to help us diagnose complex faults. And I'd interview a lot of engineers, and you get a lovely decision tree table, you know, going, yeah, why did you decide it was that, not that? And they tell me, and it was brilliant until I hit the bottom of that decision tree, and I go, so ultimately, why did you decide it was that rather than that? And they go, gut feeling. I can't put that in a neural network. I could potentially get an engineer or any experts to teach the neural network some of that stuff, and I think we are going to become teachers on a lot of these things. Because we have got a lot in our head that we can teach the bot. Think about, you know, being responsible parents, effectively, to these bots, actually teaching them some of these very basic things that we can do really easily. And then I've also put Chris in, and Chris could be anywhere. Chris is in the cloud. He's got certain expertise. We can pull Chris in at any point if we need his expertise or advice. So it's augmentation, not replacement. But actually, one of the more exciting and slightly scary areas is how do we bring a lot of this data that fuels the algorithms together? So we're seeing a lot of things around the Internet of Things coming out at the moment. You know, we've got self-driving cars, we've got smart buildings, we've got smart cities. In fact, have been working with Glasgow a wee bit on the smart city stuff. So if we start connecting everything, what could we do? So the first thing is we can start to personalize. So this is what Amazon and Netflix do. So I have taught Amazon everything it knows about me. And in doing so, it offers me stuff that's probably more relevant to me, that is tailored to me. And I like that. That's the first step. Learn about the customer, personalize the interface. Next thing is, once I've got that data, I can start to become more proactive. So you understand who the customer is, and you can nudge them. Actually say, hey, did you know this has changed? You need to think about this. Your bank account has gone overdrawn. So tell me stuff I need to know on the channels I like looking at. So we're working with a couple of companies, again, startups, one called Contact Engine, one called IMI Mobile. They use AI to start to understand who the customer is, understand what their preferences are, understand what channels they like using, and then understand what time they're likely to be using those channels so that they can do things like nudge you around. They're doing quite a lot with smart meters, actually, at the moment. So that's personalized to proactive. Then we get the algorithms really kicking in, and we get predictive. Can we start to get psychic services? This is where it gets really creepy. So can I anticipate what your next need is before you know you have it? Now, I was with a very big supermarket set of analysts not so long ago, and we were talking about their data. And they were saying, actually, they can figure out from your data, from your shopping patterns, whether you are about to get divorced. Now, I probably wouldn't use IMI Mobile or Contact Engine, both of whom are London startups, by the way. I probably wouldn't use them to send you a message on email to say, I'm really sorry to hear you're getting divorced. You might not know. Vouchers for wine might be appropriate. I don't know, but this is why we need a human in the loop on a lot of this stuff, because this is all about appropriateness. And the really interesting thing about the Internet of Things is, for me as a psychologist, it implies that all of my things are talking about me behind my back. I don't think I like that. So my instinct is, unless there's something in it for me, the WIFMs, what's in it for me, I'm going to turn them off. I'm not going to use them. And then, of course, the algorithms don't get the data that they need to actually do meaningful things. There's an obvious thing. I mean, I'm doing quite a lot with the NHS, for example, on proactive care, telecare, stuff like that. There is a trade-off. If I'm ill and I want to stay in my house, am I willing to trade some of my privacy in order to stay in my house? So if I have a smart home that's, kind of figuring out, am I going to the toilet too many times? Have I not switched on the kettle? Can it then alert a remote healthcare professional to say there's something wrong? I might be willing to sacrifice a degree of privacy for not being in hospital. So I think there's always a trade-off, but it's a really interesting space that isn't about the technology alone. The technology enables it, but the bigger disruptor, as always, is us. Hopefully, that gave you some food for thought. We will share the slides because I know you probably couldn't read it. They are ridiculously small fonts, but if you are interested in the research, we're always very, very happy to share it. Meanwhile, thank you so much for listening.